So make sure that when you're holding them, you're not holding them too close to your clothing, to hair, bushes, anything that could catch on fire. Also, the tops of them have a metal plate. Please do not touch that metal plate. It will be hot because it is indeed real. Also, you will notice that a lot of the time when you think of holding a lantern, you'll think of the movies where they hold the lantern up close to their face and it looks really cool. The issue with that is, historically, you wouldn't be able to see anything if you did that. That's for dramatic effect in the movie. You actually want to hold it down low to the ground to illuminate the ground. That way you can see where you're going, and that will be important on this tour because we are in the historic district and the trees do like to tear up the brick sidewalks a lot. And we will warn everyone when we get closer to those points, but please watch your step as we make our way through this evening. Now, when you hear some of the stories that you hear tonight as we traverse through the myths of the supernatural and the past, some people may say that some of these stories are folklore or, just hearsay. And you can choose to believe what you want this evening. However, the history that you hear behind these ghost stories is true. And with that, we will all grab our lanterns. So if you would like a lantern, please just walk back here and grab one, and we'll meet back out front here and we'll head to our first stop.
Go get the lantern.
I'll be videotaping this. So.
Okay. So we
That is if I don't chip a nail. My cousin.
Go get a lantern.
My cousin actually did that too, and.
You're gonna be our lantern lady?
You got it? Oh. Yep.
Because I tripped when I fall.
And then there's me, who trips on air like my cousin Caitlin. I'm still trying to figure out how she went to walk for 8 hours and didn't realize.
All right, does everyone have a lantern?
Did you guys want to?
Everyone all good? Okay, so we are going to head to our first stop, so if you will follow me and Sarah this way.
I forgot how beautiful the night sky can be.
You don't want a lantern?
Nope. I mean, I grew up in the city where the night sky is like not really lantern for me. You know what I mean? But I can actually see for once.
All right, so we have come to our first stop this evening. This is the Sykes building, and you will see that right here, this building was built in 1812 by Governor James Sykes, but it was actually built when he was just Dr. James Sykes. So Dr. James Sykes was very famous here in Dover because he was one of the best doctors that we had. And as local lore has it, he actually set up shop as an operating room on the east side of this building. He specialized in two very specific things, one being gallstones, not really that exciting, and then yellow fever. Now, if you know anything about yellow fever, you know that it is a very nasty disease. Pretty grotesque symptoms for that disease. So we imagine that Dr. Sykes was seeing some pretty awful things in this building with that running rampant most of the time. It was a bloodborne illness, and if you're from Delaware, you'll know that mosquitoes are a very big issue here, and so that is why it was such an issue all along from Philadelphia down to Dover. And every summer, it flared up from the end of the 1700s to the early 1800s. So we don't have any documentation to back up the fact that he did set up shop here with an operating room, but it is very ingrained in local legend here that he did. And since he was seeing such grotesque cases, we are sure that he had to take a break now and again. Local legend says that he would take a break on the second floor of this building in his home, And that is where he would smoke his favorite tobacco, which was cherry tobacco. And that is important to note. This building now is the Public Defender's Office, and we've had the luxury of actually speaking to some of the employees that actually work in here, and they've had some pretty interesting stories to tell. One happened on the second floor. Surprising. One of the employees told us that she suddenly smelled the distinct scent of what she called cherry chapstick, which, not too weird if anyone was using cherry chapstick in the building, but she found out that no one was. And so, they're not sure where that smell came from, but every now and again they still smell it. I like to think that maybe Governor Sykes is still taking a smoke break from well beyond the grave. There are other stories in this building. The second one still has to do with Dr. Sykes' time in this building. He had his family here. He had 3 children. One evening, one of the public defenders, not too long ago, was in this building on the first floor by herself. No one else in the building, no janitors, no other employees. She was burning the midnight oil. And she heard a very strange sound. She heard the distinct sound coming from the conference room of children laughing and playing. She thought that was a little weird, and since she was fairly brave, she decided to go investigate. And as soon as she stepped foot into the conference room, the sound stopped. And there were no children in there. Naturally, she decided to leave because, that's a bit much. And then other employees started saying they would hear those same exact sounds coming from the basement of the building. As far as we're aware, no one has investigated that. I don't know if I would either. So, maybe it's Dr. Sykes' children still playing around in their old home. And the third and last story I will tell you about this building actually is after Dr. Sykes' time. It's about 50 years later, in the 1870s. Who lived here then was a couple, John Nicholson and his wife, Angelica. They were both older, and John was having to take care of his wife, Angelica, quite often. She would often be left in the second story of this building in her bedroom. One evening, John left Angelica in her favorite armchair as he went downstairs to go get something for her, and when he returned, he found her dead on the floor. This is the only time we have actual documentation of someone dying in this building. Supposedly the cause of death was a pulmonary embolism, and she went quick. Now, I bring this up because this, I think, is one of the creepiest stories that we have in this building. And we think it's the most creepy because it was caught on video. And we have had the luxury of seeing this video, and it is real. There is an office on the second floor where Angelica's bedroom possibly used to be. There is a desk that sits against the wall, and on that back wall, not facing the desk, are filing cabinets. So your back is turned to these filing cabinets at all times. One person was working in this office, and they heard a very distinct, loud sound, and it just sounded like tapping on the filing cabinets. Louder than that, to be fair. Of course, as any sane person would do, the employee immediately got out their phone and started recording. And you can hear it clear as day, that loud tap, 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 tap. And it just kept going and going. It's about 30 seconds of it, nonstop, before you hear on the video, "Okay, you can stop now," from the employee. And it did. So, the employee decides to investigate filing cabinets. I mean, it could be anything, right? A mouse, an air vent, bugs, who knows? But there was nothing there that could have caused that noise. So, maybe Angelica's still trying to get someone's attention all these years later. And with that, we will head to our next stop and follow Sarah.
I noticed something. That light on the second floor, it was off when she was talking, but in the middle of one of the stories, it turned on. I caught it. I didn't catch it turning on video, but I did see it like docked in that window. But when I looked back up, it was on. So I don't know if that was a glitch or was it Sky. How will you pronounce his last name? So
You right?
don't really like the light on my face.
Huh?
Don't really like light on my face like that. So why do you think I normally have my hood? I always forget about the steps. Oh.
Alright, this is the site of our next stop. Now you might notice we are not actually standing in front of a building. The site that we're going to be talking about tonight is actually a building that will no longer exist. This is going to be where the old Dover jail once stood during the colonial era. Now obviously the jail is going to have many inmates over the years, however the one that we are going to talk about tonight is going to be Cheney Clow. Now Cheney Clow is going to be important during the American Revolution. He is going to be a farmer here in Kent County, and he is going to be well known throughout town for being a loyalist, somebody who is loyal to the British Crown. Now, this is not going to necessarily be a major problem with his neighbors until the winter of Valley Forge. During the winter of Valley Forge, when the Continental troops up north are starving to death, they are going to send out foraging parties. These foraging parties are going to come all the way down south here to Kent County, and they are going to forage for food and supplies. They don't go really in the woods foraging, they go to homesteads. And they are not very nice about how they acquire their goods. And they specifically target loyalist families because why not? They're the enemy, right? This obviously is not going to sit very well with the loyalist families of Kent County, but most especially with Cheney Clow. He is going to take it upon himself to do a little bit of good for his side, and he is going to end up raiding his own neighbors and stealing their food and supplies and shipping it off to the British ships stationed in the bay. Now, this does not make for good news, obviously. And this is going to cause enough of a conflict that the local citizens here are going to call up the local militia, and they're going to demand that something be done about Cheney Clow. So the local militia is going to agree. They're going to go out to Clow's homestead where he has erected a small fort, and there's going to be a firefight that ensues. Multiple men are going to be wounded, but Cheney Clow is going to be able to escape with his family. They're going to head to Maryland, and they're going to remain there for the remainder of the Revolution. Cheney Clow is actually going to receive a commission in the British Army, and he's going to become a commissioned British officer. Now, after the war, obviously, the British do not win, and Cheney Clow is going to elect to remain in America, and even crazier, he is going to elect to move back to his original home here in Kent County. He's going to think that everybody has forgotten all of the crazy stuff he has done. That was not the case. Not at all. He's going to move back, he's going to be immediately recognized, and the local sheriff is going to be summoned to go flush out Cheney Clow and bring him in on the charge of treason. Once again, a militia is formed, they head out to Clow's homestead, and they try to arrest the man. A brief firefight is going to ensue once again, and Cheney Clow is going to be captured and brought in, however, not before one of the sheriff's men is going to be shot and killed. He's going to be brought back here to Dover, and he's going to be put up in the jail that stood right here while he awaits his trial. Once he's brought to trial, he's tried with treason, and he is going to say, "I'm not guilty." Now, why does he say that? for a couple of different reasons. One, he says, I declared no such allegiance to the American government, the American colonies. I am a British citizen. I fought for the British. I am a commissioned British officer. Therefore, I'm a prisoner of war. And I committed no treason against my country. Now, Dover is very patriotic. But very surprisingly, they are going to actually agree. The jury is going to agree, and they are going to exonerate him. They're going to let him go. However, Chaney Clow is not a favorite figure of the people of Dover, and they are going to gather outside of the courtroom, and they are going to scream and holler and yell, and they're going to demand a harsher justice. This is pretty common at the time. The crowds can actually sway the opinion of the jury, and this is what happens. They are going to decide to charge Clow with treason, and they are going to post a $10,000 bond for him. This is an incredible sum that he can never hope to pay off. So, he is sent back to this jail. And he's going to sit there for a few months until he's brought to trial once again, this time for the murder of the sheriff's man. Now, he's going to once again plead not guilty. Why is this? One, this is not murder in his eyes. He is a prisoner of war. He is an officer of the British Crown. He had every right to defend his small homestead and his family against intruders. Second, there is no way to prove that Chaney Clow's bullet is the one that killed this man. The sheriff himself is actually going to attest to this and say that indeed the man was shot in the back. That can only happen if that was friendly fire. Once again, the jury is prepared to let him go. And once again, the crowds out here will not accept that. They scream and they holler and they yell, and Chaney Clow is again accused and tried with murder. And he is going to be sentenced to death. Now, at this time, we did have a hanging apparatus right out here, and executions would oftentimes happen the very same day. However, this is not going to be the case with Chaney Clow. The government here does not agree with the verdict. They do not like the man, they make no qualms about that, but they do not believe that he is guilty of the crimes he's being accused of. So they refuse to execute him. So he goes back to this jail, and he sits, and he rots. This is a dank, and a musty, and a dirty jail. And he is going to sit here for years. And he is going to wait for years for his execution. His wife is going to write to the governor and plead for her husband's release. His children are going to write to the governor and plead for their father's release. Chaney Clow himself is going to write multiple times and plead for his release, and all to no avail. Until finally, after years of rotting away, Chaney Clow is finally going to have enough. He's going to write to the governor one last time, and he is going to say, either you pardon me, or you execute me. But this waiting is simply intolerable. And we would not be having a ghost story if he was let go. Chaney Clow is going to be executed. He is going to be marched from this jail. He's going to head straight down this path out onto the green here, where he is going to be hung. Now, the crowds out here, they have waited years for this. They are hooping, they are hollering. They are so excited this man they have hated for so long is finally going to die. But some say that as Chaney Clow is walking to his doom, that they can hear him singing a quiet hymn to himself. Now, that was centuries ago. Long after Chaney Clow is dead and buried, and long after all the people that so called for his death are long gone themselves. People say that if you stand in this exact spot here on the green late at night, when it is still and quiet, that you can sometimes hear a quiet hymn on the breeze. And some people say that that might be Chaney Clow reliving his final moments on this earth. But if you would like to follow Nicole to our next stop, we can learn more about some of the other ghosts that haunt this side of the green.
Here the sidewalk gets a bit rocky here, so please watch your step as we walk through.
Newcastle. Yeah.
Okay, and now we come to the oldest house on the green. This building behind me is the Ridgely House. It is named that because ever since it was built, I believe only 50 years have not had a Ridgely family member in this building. So that would be 200 years that a Ridgely family member has lived here, and I do mean in present day as well. So this building was built in 1726. You will see 1728 on that plaque. That is incorrect. It was built in 1726, and we will be talking about a Ridgely family member today. We'll be talking about Miss Mabel Lloyd Ridgely. She lived here in the early 1900s. She was a suffragist and a historic preservationist. She's actually the reason that the green looks like it does today. So we have her to thank. So at the time of the story that we're going to tell, Miss Mabel and her husband Henry were living in this house. And to set the scene for you, Mabel is winding down for the evening, about to read her book, getting cozy in bed, and her husband says, "I need to take a smoke break." And so he goes downstairs to do so. Mabel is left alone in the upstairs of the building. There's something a little off. Mabel doesn't feel quite right as she's reading her book. She feels like something is watching her. Someone is watching her. She looks up from her book and she sees a shadowy figure of a man standing in her doorway. What's even worse about this is she recognizes the man, and it is not her husband Henry. No, it is a person that she has seen only in portraits before. It is John M. Clayton. Who is John M. Clayton? Well, he was a very important lawyer here in Delaware, made his way up into the Delaware Supreme Court, and eventually became the U.S. Secretary under President Zachary Taylor. So, very important man. So, the weird thing about him standing in Mabel Lloyd Ridgely's doorway is that he's buried 2 blocks from here. He's dead by the time Miss Mabel is here. So, Mabel naturally lets out a very loud scream, as most people would, seeing a figure in their doorway like that. I imagine it probably alerted the neighbors, but it most importantly alerted her husband Henry, who came rushing up the stairs, and he was so flustered, and he asked Mabel, "What's wrong? What's going on?" Because he didn't see John M. Clayton. He was already gone. I imagine Miss Mabel didn't sleep very well that night. So why would he have been visiting the Ridgely family members? Well, at one point, he lived in part of this building. So that could be why. Maybe he was just visiting his old homestead when he lived here so long ago. But there's another story that I like to think might be why he was visiting a Ridgely family member in particular. So he was a lawyer, and a lot of the Ridgely family members were lawyers in his time as well. And so there's a story that says that he lent some legal briefings to a Ridgely family member, and they were never returned. So maybe he's still looking for them. So if you ever find yourself in the house and you see John M. Clayton, see if you can find his papers. And with that, we'll head to our next stop. We are going to cross the street on this one, so please be careful. We best we can.
There you go.
Alrighty, everyone. The next house that we're going to talk about is once again not actually this house. It is going to be Woodburn, the governor's mansion. Now that is quite a few blocks away. Many more blocks than I feel like walking tonight, so we're not going to walk you all the way down there. However, Woodburn is going to be, as I just said, the governor's mansion. It is going to also be known as one of the most haunted residences on the East Coast. Now, Woodburn was made the official governor's mansion in 1965. However, up until then, it was a private residence. It was going to be built in the late 1700s by Charles Hilliard III, and he is going to feature in our very first Woodburn story. Now, Charles Hilliard is going to build Woodburn, but he is going to pretty quickly pass away, and he's going to leave it to his son-in-law, Martin Bates. Martin Bates is going to inherit the home, he's going to love the home, and then he is going to, in 1814, invite a traveling preacher by the name of Lorenzo Dow to come stay the evening. Now, Lorenzo is going to head up to his room, and on the steps he is going to encounter a man he has not yet seen. This is going to be an elderly gentleman, and he is going to be dressed a little bit out of fashion. He's going to be wearing a powdered wig and knee breeches. Not super out of the time, but old enough to make an impression. However, Lorenzo is not going to judge him, and he is going to bid him good night and head to bed. The next morning, he's going to come down the steps and sit for breakfast, and everybody else is going to be sitting down as well, except for that man. He's going to think this odd, and then everybody starts to eat breakfast without this man, and that's pretty rude. So he inquires after this, and he says, "What about the elderly gentleman that lives in this house as well? Where is he?" And Martin Bates is going to find this kind of curious, and he's going to say, "You are the only man that I know of that is staying in my house. What are you talking about?" He is going to inquire after the appearance of this elderly gentleman, and Lorenzo is going to give a brief description, and Martin Bates' face is going to go quite pale, almost as if he had seen a ghost. For Lorenzo has described the spitting image of his deceased father-in-law, Charles Hilliard III. Now, Mr. Hilliard is probably hanging around his house because he loves it so dearly, and he did not get to experience this house he put so much love into. As he also features in a couple of other ghost stories. Most notably, he is considered to be the wine ghost of Woodburn. The story goes that if you leave a glass of wine on the grand staircase late at night, by the next morning that glass of wine will be drunk. Now, Charles Hilliard was known to love a strong spirit in his day, so that's why he's attributed with this particular ghost story. Now, our next story is going to take place a couple of years later, and by couple I mean a couple of centuries, and it's going to take place after Woodburn has become the governor's mansion. Now, one of the first governors to move in is going to be Governor Pierre DuPont. He is going to love this house. He's going to make it a second residence for him and his family. And he is going to also love the fact that his new house is supposedly haunted. One evening, the family is settling in for the night, and they begin to experience some odd happenings. They begin to smell cigar smoke, even though nobody is smoking in the house. And then they begin to notice that some pictures are tilted a little bit off center. That's not terribly normal. And then last but not least, they are going to hear some knocking. And that's not what you really want to hear. But they look around, they don't see anybody, so they of course bring out the Ouija board to get their answers instead. They ask the Ouija board, "Is my house haunted?" The Ouija board of course answers yes. This doesn't really seem to affect the family though. They kind of already know the house is haunted. So they go to bed and try to put it out of their mind. Little do they know that the next night is going to be considered one of Woodburn's worst hauntings. The next night, the family is once again settling in for the evening, and they hear thumping throughout the house. And once again, they live in the city, so they go out and they check and they see what's going on. They cannot find anybody or anything to make that thumping noise. So they go to bed. And then they are immediately jolted out of bed by loud, piercing screaming happening outside of their bedroom window. This, of course, frightens the bejesus out of them. They jump up out of bed, they look around the house, they cannot find an explanation, so they go to bed. And then the screaming started, again, all throughout the night. The family can get no rest. However, this does not really seem to affect them terribly because they still live there until Pierre Dupont is no longer governor. The next governor to move in is going to be Governor Mike Castle, and he is also going to be in love with the fact that his new house is haunted. He is actually going to be well known throughout town for his massive Halloween parties that he throws. He opens them up to the public and invites them in, hoping that they have a ghostly encounter themselves. Nothing really comes from this, but you can't blame him for trying. As a matter of fact, one of the most well-known hauntings occurs during his residency. During his inaugural ball, several sightings of the little girl ghost are going to be seen. We do not know why the little girl ghost is there. We do know, however, that she is dressed in a gingham dress and a bonnet, and she appears randomly. She is favored. She does favor, however, the gardens out back, which is where she was seen that evening. She was also felt multiple times in the Grand Hall, hugging on people's clothing, almost as if she was a small child looking for cover. Now, unfortunately, we do not have time to go into all of Woodburn's ghosts, but not to plug ourselves, but we do give a tour of Woodburn the first Saturday of every month, and I suggest you go on it and see if you can have your own ghostly encounter. If you would like, we can head down this way for our next stop.
I almost dropped my phone.
What happened? Oh, don't do that.
When I was trying to turn in a certain way and it tried to slide.
Huh?
Like that. Nope.
I don't know. Somewhere.
Alright, everybody, this is going to be our next stop. So, this is going to be the last remaining residence of Caesar Rodney. You guys know who Caesar Rodney is? Yes? Yeah, there you go. Yes, no. So, this is a ghost tour. This is not a history tour. So, I will give you not the full story of Caesar Rodney, but I will give you enough context so you can understand the hauntings that happen in this building. Caesar Rodney is going to be considered Delaware's greatest revolutionary hero. He is going to be our first and fourth governor. He is going to be a signer of the Declaration of Independence, but what he is most well known for is his midnight ride. Now, Caesar Rodney is also going to be landed gentry. He's going to have many homes here in Delaware. He is going to have his plantation home Byfield. He's also going to have homes in the Wilmington area, but he is also going to rent this building. This is the last remaining building of his that still stands. Caesar Rodney's story begins in the year 1776. He is going to be part of the Continental Congress, who is going to eventually declare or write the Declaration of Independence. As a matter of fact, in June of that year, they are going to be deciding whether to vote on the matter of independence or not. They don't have permission to vote on this really, so Congress breaks. They send everybody back to their respective colonies to get permission to vote, and they'll reconvene the next month. Caesar Rodney is going to return here to Delaware, and he is going to be tasked with overthrowing a loyalist rebellion. Now, Caesar Rodney is not in the best of health. He is already the oldest he's ever been. He is also going to have asthma, which is incurable at the time. But last but not least, he is also going to have facial cancer. Now, at the time, facial cancer there's no treatment. The best they can do is simply continue to cut it out. He's going to have an open, gaping wound on the side of his face at all times. After his little stint with the Loyalists, he does not feel like traveling all the way back up to Philadelphia to vote. So he is going to talk to the other two delegates, and he is going to have them agree to vote yes for independence, and he's going to stay here in Dover. The other two delegates are going to go back up to Philadelphia and vote. One of them is going to vote yes, and the other one is going to get cold feet and vote no. This makes Delaware's vote null. The man that voted yes is furious, and he dashes a note off to Caesar Rodney saying, "You have to get back up here tomorrow. We cannot be divided in this." Caesar Rodney is going to receive this note here in Dover in the middle of the night. He's going to jump out of bed, jump in a carriage, and he's going to take off to Philadelphia. This is a ride that on average will take 2 to 3 days to make, and he makes it in 14 hours of non-stop riding. He's going to get there in time to change Delaware's vote to yes, which is going to help the other two holdout states change their vote to yes as well, and the declaration is going to be agreed to and begun to be signed 2 days later. Now, unfortunately for Caesar Rodney, that facial cancer is going to take his life, and he's going to pass away only a few years later. He's going to be buried out on his family's plantation. However, what they could not have begun to possibly know at the time is part of Byfield is going to become part of the Dover Air Force Base. And we do not know where Caesar Rodney is buried. Now, I did not mention that Caesar Rodney left in the middle of a summer thunderstorm. And that is actually going to be pretty important for this haunting. Years later, after Caesar Rodney has passed, this building is the only one that remains that he inhabited, and we had the opportunity to talk to a few of the employees that work here. And they had some pretty interesting stories to tell. A lot of it was pretty standard haunting stuff. They'd come in and their furniture had been moved around. That's pretty common, except for the vague feeling of dread that was left behind that they didn't quite care for. And then employees also refuse to go into the basement at night. They don't know why. It's just an uneasy feeling that they have. However, the most interesting story happens when it rains outside. When it rains, when it thunderstorms, when it rains and when it thunderstorms, somebody is heard to be rushing down the steps in the central hall here. When people run out to investigate, see who is running up and down these steps, they can find nobody. I like to think that perhaps that is Caesar Rodney returning to his final house that he can call his own, and perhaps those storms remind him of his fateful night in 1776. Now, we would like to follow Nicole to our next stop.
We're going to head down this.
Wait, what am I doing? I think every town has them. I know New Jersey had some.
Yeah.
And I know we also had lizards too.
Lizards? Oh, yes, we do.
No, I found one in my house before back in New Jersey. So I'm like, hi, can I help you? Stuck his tongue out at me too.
Only you.
Oh, you have no idea how tempted I was to catch it. Sadly, I did not.
We have them in the, in the parks too.
Really?
It's fun.
Nice.
Alright. So now we have come to the Thomas Stevenson house. It likes to introduce itself. So, who was Thomas Stevenson? Thomas Stevenson was a carpenter and a cabinet maker here in Dover, but he was also an undertaker. In fact, most of the time, carpenters were also undertakers back in the Victorian period. And that's when he came here to Dover. He came from Smyrna, and in 1846 he bought this property, which already had 3 structures added onto it. They are dated back to 1804, and they are on the back of this house. He actually built the part that you are seeing here, the front-facing side, and that was in 1846. He moved here with his second wife and his 3 children, one of whom was a woman named Sarah. Now, what's interesting about this house is towards the back, there is a little schoolhouse that actually still remains as a schoolhouse today. It is not in use, but it is still set up like it was back when Thomas Stevenson made it for his daughter, Sarah. You see, she was a teacher. She taught her nieces and nephews right out of this very house. So, Sarah is very happy teaching out of this house, but then she meets the love of her life, John Kirk. He is a journalist here in Dover, and unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of work here at that time for his journalism. So they ended up moving up to New York. They left Thomas here in the house. Unfortunately, in 1865, Thomas passes away. Instead of leaving his house to his son, which is more normal in this time period, he ends up leaving it to Sarah and her husband, John. Mostly because of that little schoolhouse that sits in the back. Sarah is so touched by this, she moves back here and she continues teaching out of that schoolhouse. She will live in this house until she dies in 1910. She dies from flu complications. Now, the reason we talk about Sarah is because of a particular story from this house. This house was sold recently, about a year ago, and we actually got the chance to talk to the woman who was selling it. The person who lived here before her, it was her father. Her father lived in this house and kept it as it was historically. That meant no electricity. He lived by candlelight in this house. So when we got to see it, it looked exactly the same. And he kept that little schoolhouse the entire time, upstairs. Now that the house was being sold, there was some work that needed to be done to it. Naturally, most people don't want a house without electricity. So they brought in construction workers to work on that. And that's where our story begins. The woman who was selling this house told us that one night the construction workers were here. They were, as they say, burning the midnight oil. And the clock struck 3 a.m. They were still here. Strangely, they hear a noise upstairs. They hear the sound of a woman speaking. Now, these are 3 male construction workers who believe they're the only ones in this house. But they figure, oh, maybe it's just the woman who's selling it, right? Maybe she's just here and we just didn't know it. So they crawled up the stairs. They said, hello, is anyone there? And they got no answer. They decide to investigate. What they didn't know is that the stairs that they were climbing were up to the little schoolhouse that Sarah taught in. And as they were climbing the stairs, they knew something felt a little off, of course. And when they reached the top, they realized there was no one there. Naturally, they decided, we can finish the work in the morning, we're gonna go. I would too. So they leave and they come back the next morning and the woman selling the house is in the building. And they ask her, hey, were you here last night? We heard some strange stuff. And she told them, no, you should have been the only ones in the building last night. Now, I don't know if those construction workers ever came back. I know they never did find out exactly where that voice was coming from. But since it was upstairs in that schoolhouse, something leads me to believe that maybe Sarah was teaching a lesson from beyond the grave, long after she was gone. And with that, we'll take to our final stop on the tour. If you will follow Sarah.
So it is owned by the Restaurant Association nonprofit now. We haven't had the ability to go inside there.
It's like, why me? I feel like because you're the ghost girl in the family.
Alright, this is going to be our last stop of the evening. This is going to be the green itself. Now, at this final stop, we talk about a man named Samuel Chu. If you guys are familiar with Dover ghost stories, this story might be familiar. This is the story of the ghost that's buried on the green itself, right under your very feet. Samuel Chu is going to be born in the 1600s. He is going to be born on a plantation in Maryland. He is going to train as a physician, and he's going to marry a lady by the name of Mary Galloway. They're going to live a very happy 19 years until she very tragically passes away. Samuel is going to be heartbroken. He is going to be so heartbroken, in fact, that he is going to pick up his entire family, what remains of them, and move to Kent County, Delaware. Now, once in Kent County, he is going to establish his own plantation called Whitehall. There, he is going to end up being one of the largest enslavers in the state, holding up to 63 people in bondage at one point. All of this wealth and influence is going to get him noticed by the local government. And he is going to be appointed the Chief Justice of the 3 lower counties. This is what Delaware was known as at the time. Now, he is going to serve in this role for many years. He is going to be seen about the green in his customary black robes and white wig. He's going to actually have a very favorite tree out here that he likes to stand under and contemplate. But this is going to be kind of short-lived because he's going to die at the age of only 50. Normally, this is where a person's story ends. But not so for Samuel Chu. A few short years after his death, rumors are going to begin to circulate around town of a ghostly apparition seen here on the green. These rumors are going to start with one man, a young farmer, who is crossing the green on his way home from work one night, and he is going to come across the ghost of Samuel Chu, floating under his favorite poplar tree. Now, this is obviously terrifying. The man is going to book it to his home, and he's going to tell nobody of his encounter. Until, a few days later, it happens again. He is once again on the way home from work, and he is going to once again see the ghostly apparition of Samuel Chu floating under that tree. Except this time, the ghost is going to pick its head up. It's going to stare the man straight in the eyes, and it's going to beckon him forward. This is not what you want to see late at night. That man is going to be so terrified, he's going to book it, and this time not to his home, but to a tavern. And he is going to tell everybody his tale. Naturally, after this, the town itself is going to start seeing the ghost. Everybody has a Samuel Chu story. Women said that on warm summer evenings, they could feel his cold presence brush by them on the green. Men say that they can feel him tugging on their coattails as they cross. And yet others say that they have seen the floating ghost floating about here on the green. This is going to actually be so terrifying for people that it disrupts local commerce. This is also going to go on for 2 long years, until finally the townsfolk have had enough. One evening, a group of men are going to meet at a local tavern, the Eagle Tavern, and they are going to hatch a plan. They are going to decide to put this plan into motion the next morning. The next morning, they're going to gather the citizens of Dover out here on the green. They're going to tell them their plan, which is simply to hold a funeral for this ghost. What they're going to do is they are going to select the tree that Samuel Chu and his ghost have loved so much. They are going to dig a hole 6 foot deep, and they are going to select 6 men to carry an empty casket, supposedly holding the ghost of Samuel Chu, and they're going to lower it into that grave. As church bells are going to ring out in the distance, it will be ushered to the grave a second time. They're going to cover his coffin up, pat it down real nice, and they're going to scurry on to their homes and wait for nightfall. They're hoping that their plan has worked. Come nightfall, there is no sign of the ghost of Samuel Chu. The next night, no ghost. The next week, the next month, the next year, no ghost. Their plan seems to have worked, and the citizens rejoice. Except, supposedly, the ghost has returned. There have been reported hauntings here on the green late at night. People are saying that they have again seen Samuel Chu floating around here on the green. So, as you guys head to your cars this evening, if you keep an eye out, you might actually see the ghost of the green. And with that, we would like to wish you guys good night.
Yes, thank you everyone for coming out this evening and supporting the park. We hope you enjoyed our Haunted Dover Lantern Tour. If you are all finished with these lanterns, if you don't want to get any photos or anything, just leave them right in front of the bell house over there, right by those benches. And as you're going back to your cars tonight, like Sarah said, if you see anything strange, do let us know.
Thank you. Thank you.